Welcome, and I am so glad you're here, either live or on the replay, because today we are going to be talking about what changes have we seen in the past 47 years from 1975 to our present day. We're also going to be looking at going into 2023 and the impact and the meaningful change that we are going to be creating. So I'm excited you're here. If you're new to the show, I'm Charmaine Tanner. I'm a parent of an adult son, Dylan, who has Down syndrome. And we just celebrated his 34th birthday. And so throughout my past 34 years, I've been a parent advocating. I also was a teacher for 30 years, both a special ed teacher and general ed. And so I blend those perspectives together. And the thing that I wanted to do is to recognize that as parents, as teachers, as students, we all can have those overwhelming feelings, right? So sometimes it feels like, we are just constantly having to be advocating. We can't let our guard down for like 1 minute, right? It's really, really hard, not only for parents to be advocating, but believe it or not, teachers are also advocating for students. And so we share this in common. And yes, we're not alone, but it's still like really, really hard, right? Especially when you go to meeting after meeting and you send information and you're sharing articles and research-based strategies, and it's just like nobody is hearing you. And you may be serving on some committees, either district or state level, but you're starting to think like, I don't know, this kind of seems like token input, right? So the thing that happens is when we're not seeing any change, when we're constantly advocating, when we feel like, what else can we do so we can be heard? That burnout comes when we're not even seeing any kind of incremental changes, right? So let me know in the comments, does this sound familiar? Can you relate to this? And then on top of all of it, one of the things that you try to do is like maintain your cool, like give people grace, but understand that you have to be assertive. And it's just like this constant thing. So welcome. Let us know in the comments. Say hi. Tell me, can you relate to any of these things? Or maybe it just gets to the point where you no longer have confidence in yourself. And you feel this incredible self-doubt. And it's like, it must be me. I must be the one that's lacking. I must not have the skills. I must not have the information I need because it's not working for my child. And we can get stuck in that position. And that's not going to be helpful for any of us. Hey, Trisha. Trisha is here with us. And Trisha, she says, that's me. I have had to balance myself this year between pulling back and staying firm. Yeah. And that's the kind of the wisdom that we need, right? Is, just kind of that self-preservation and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, and then knowing there are some situations where it's like, no, I really got to stand firm in this. Well, we're going to be looking at, like I said, are students better off? If you go back to 1975, a mere 47 years ago, that's when our first federal special ed law was passed, otherwise known as PL 94-142. Um, and you look at, okay, now through this span of 47 years, what really has changed? What is How are students better off today? So there are ways that we have improved, and we're going to look at a few of those first, because one of my values is to make sure that we are strength, if I can say it, one of my values is that we are strength focused. So it's not only looking at the strengths that our kids have and making sure other people understand that. It's looking at the strengths that the education system has. And we don't often give credit to what has been happening that's been positive in our education system. So let's spend a couple minutes talking about that, because I think that's really important. So we'll go back here. So one of the things that has gotten better is now we are seeing higher graduation rates for students with disabilities. So back in 1995, only 42% of students with disabilities were graduating from high school. So just like about half. Now, if you go fast forward to 2018, the last data we have here is that has increased to 72% of students with disabilities are graduating high school. And this data comes from the Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP. And I'll be giving the link for that in my weekly newsletter. So the other thing that we have noticed a change and things have gotten better is that more students are spending time in the general ed classroom. If you look at the 2020-2021 school year, and you look at students with all kinds of disabilities across our country, 66.17% of students were in general education classes for 80% of the time, or more. Now, there's always little caveats with that, right? But at least we're seeing some increase there. Now, what else has been getting better is many schools have really done an exceptional job with family engagement, and like true, honest, authentic family engagement. One of the really good resources that you can go to to see more about how schools and families can work together is the National PTA. And they talk about transformative family engagement, and that we have to make sure that it's inclusive, all the families in the school, not just the families that come to parent conferences, not just the families that come to the choir concert, but all families we have to reach out and engage and build relationships with. We also want to make sure our family engagement strategies are individualized. That they're integrated into the school process, and that they're really impactful, that it's not, again, just this token, like, yes, we have a family council that meets once a month or something, but no, it's really, really looking at how can we collaborate and work together. The other area that has gotten better since 1975 is we know so much more now about trauma-informed teaching, right? And that is like so important. And one of the basic things that we've learned is that relationships between adults and students have to come first. Relationships are more important than the content. Relationships are more important than the academic standards. relationships are really that foundation. And we have seen schools across the country that are really embracing trauma-informed teaching strategies. And that is huge, huge, huge. And kind of to go along with that, we've also learned so much more through people like Mona Delahook about the neuroscience approach and how we can, align what we know about the brain within our teaching in our schools. And the whole concept of neurodiversity, that, each brain is different, that it doesn't mean that your child needs to be fixed. What we're seeing across the country is more teachers and families are beginning to understand that we don't have to have these social skill programs to make our kids fit in to what everybody else is doing in the building. I'm seeing less IEPs as an advocate that have maintained eye contact as a goal. I think that's a win. People are finally understanding that kids can focus and kids can learn, and it doesn't mean they have to be making eye contact with the teacher. So yeah, all of that has made our schools better. And then the one I love is universal design for learning. We have so many more schools that have trained their staff, that have educated parents about it, that are really implementing it with fidelity, which is, right, that's a favorite F word. And again, through universal design for learning, we're understanding that the barriers are not within the student, but the barriers are in our classroom environments, with our belief system, with the culture of our schools. Those are the barriers. And it's not that students need to be fixed or students have to do something differently in order to be accepted. So these are the things that we've noticed have been getting better. So I would love for you to tell us, type in the comments, what progress has your school been making that you are like so excited about? And I'd love for you to share that. Hey, Anne's here from South Carolina. Yeah, let us know, Anne. What do you think, what progress have you seen in your school, in your district, that it's like, yes, we're making progress, we're getting better? So what do you think? Allison says, my issue is a need to constantly ensure dots are connected. Ex-teacher is actually using WISE materials as agreed, particularly with staff turnover. It's stressful. Yes, yes, yes. And that's the thing. I mean, sometimes I say to parents, it's like, I feel like, we have to be the IEP police to really make sure things are, getting done, and that, like Allison said, the way things were agreed upon. And so that can be incredibly stressful, right? It's that it's that feeling that you can never let your guard down. But Allison, are there things in your school or in your district, do you see some incremental baby steps towards progress? And it doesn't have to be in the realm of special education, because there's a lot of things that we can change in education, besides, looking at inclusive education. So what do you think, Allison? Have there been, let's look, has there been any good things? And Anne-Marie says, does anyone know where to find what SS says about students with IEPs and their right to graduate with a diploma? A certificate isn't the same. Yeah, so if you want, Anne, I can put the link in when our show is done. But yeah, and I think it's a good idea to not only look at what IDEA says, but the Elementary Secondary School Act, which is for all education, and it includes kids with disabilities, right? So that's also a good law for you to look up. And so Tricia says, inclusion seems to be a priority. A few hiccups, but I like to see my child in general ed full time. Well, isn't that cool, Tricia? I'm glad that you can see those little bits of change, and that I know things are going so much better for your son this year. So yes, yes, yes. Allison says, yes, we have a new inclusion specialist. She's working hard with me on helping my son make friends, which is huge. Yay, yay. Yeah, so let us know. Does your district employ, like sometimes they're called inclusion specialists or inclusion facilitator? And that person can be like a great liaison for you to connect with and make relationships. So that is great, Allison. And it's so good, good, good. And just think of the momentum that you'll get now and how that will keep carrying over to 2023. Anne says, one thing I've noticed is the PTIs that are making a difference are the ones educating and talking about inclusion. South Carolina is barely doing any training. Yeah, and so when Anne talks about PTIs, those are your parent training and information centers. Each state has at least one. If you have a lot of people in your state, you have more than one parent training and information center. They are actually funded through IDEA. So they get federal funds to be able to provide the training, give information. Most parent training and information centers will have parent advisors. So that can be a really great resource to tap into. And if you don't see them providing the training that you think is really helpful, then I would make a request, right? So hey, Snow's here from South Carolina too, and she says, sadly, in South Carolina, the Department of Ed states that special ed teachers equal inclusion specialists, which is absurd. Yeah. So yeah, it is like so dependent for where you live as to what kinds of services your child's going to get, what the belief system is there, right? And so we're going to look at a few things that still need to change even more. So let's look at some of that, because what we have found out is advocating for one student at a time isn't creating that meaningful change that we need. And that's why I am like so excited, because in January, our new membership community called Connecting for Change, we are going to be all about supporting and doing more collaborative, collective advocacy, because we still have things that we need to change. And one of the big things that is important is how much time even students with intellectual disabilities are spending in the general ed classroom. And so what we know is from the 2021 school year, students with intellectual disabilities, only 17.9% of them were in general ed classes for 80% of the time. Now, we know just because they checked a box and just because a student's sitting in a chair in general ed does not mean that we are providing the support so they can be actively participating and learning, right? So that number is very small, as but it's even smaller when you look at how many kids are really actively participating and learning, besides their friends in school. The other horrible thing, restraint, that we need to look at is when we look from the Office of Civil Rights and their latest data from 2017 to 2018, 80% of the students being restrained in schools are students on IEPs. That is totally unacceptable. That is something that, no, 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 right? I mean, I can think of an exception if your child's running across the street and somebody has to grab him and pull him back. That could be a restraint that I would say, okay. Otherwise, no. So that's an area that maybe that's where you want to put your collective energy into. And then look at this. If we look at how many not students, but just children up to the age of 18, 14.4% of them live under the federal poverty level. And how does that impact kids? What do we do about that? Where is the bandwagon people are jumping on to make sure kids have food, right? I mean, really, really basic things. The other horrible statistic is that 77% of the kids that are secluded are kids on IEPs. 77% of them. So this, again, is something that could be banned in every state. And I know Tricia, who's on here, Tricia and I and a couple other parents and some people in Idaho are working on making sure that we have legislation that will ban seclusion, ban corporal punishment, and prevent restraint. But look at what else we need to stop. Inclusion is a commodity. And this was something, I don't know if you're a member of, and I'll put here full screen so you can see it. If you're a member of ASCD, but I've been a member of this since I was teaching. Most of their articles are about or are written for educators, administrators. And I was a member when I was a teacher, and I continue to be a member because it has, educational research. It explains, best practices. So there's a lot that we can learn from them. And what was interesting is one of the articles in this recent issue it was all about poverty, but they were interviewing some high school students, and the high school students were saying, yeah, we belong. We can belong. We can be included if we have the money. And they were saying you could buy inclusion at the high school. And it was like, wow. It was like, what do they mean? And they're like, yeah, you can buy inclusion. You can buy your letter jacket. You can buy a student parking ticket for $100, to be able to park in the student lot. You can, buy your own band instrument. You can buy your own computer that you have at home. And so, yes, inclusion, belonging, these high school students were saying it's possible if you have the money. And it's like, oh my goodness. Yes, yes, yes. We still have work to do, right? It's like really, really, it can be really hard. So let me bring up some more of your comments here. Yeah. Let me go back here. So Allison says, keep saying to your special ed teachers and inclusion specialists, least dangerous assumption. Yeah, that article by Cheryl Jorgensen, and I'll make a note to put that in our newsletter. And least dangerous assumption is like an excellent article. And so let me see, if you don't get my weekly newsletter, you can sign up. You can go to iep.today/weekly adv tips, because then we can make sure that you get the links that we're talking about today. And thanks, Allison. Yeah, that's like a really important article that we want people to know about. And Tricia says, students with special ed needs are being abused by inappropriate and excessive restraints and seclusion. Yeah, and even with those percentages being so high as far as kids and IEPs being restrained and secluded, we have to also notice and realize that there are kids without IEPs that are being restrained and secluded. So I know one of the things that we're working on in Idaho is like helping people know this is not just a special ed issue. This is an education issue for the whole state, right? And Anne-Marie says, how convenient, a class of students with limited communication skills are the highest population of restraints and seclusion. Yeah, and I mean, that's the other thing. A lot of times parents feel like their kids are going to be safer in a special ed room, but yeah, we don't have data that shows that's true. And especially for students that aren't able to come home and report to their parents what happened at school. So yes, restraint and seclusion, that might be your passion project that you want to work on in 2023. So think about some ways that you might want to be working on that. Yeah, and being suspended, yeah, like even preschoolers, right? Or the silent suspension, come pick your child up early. Yeah, and what are they, is it in, I think is it informal? There's like a word that's going around, informal suspensions. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but yeah, silent suspension where, parents are just told to bring their kids or come pick up their kids early from school. And the reality is that is a suspension. So that might be a project that you want to work on with other people in your district about, what can we do besides telling kids to go away, to go home for the day? What else can we be doing? Hey, Shelley. She says, so many parents complaining about even young kids getting recess taken away. Yes, some states have laws. I believe this is a great one to work on in my state, in Washington. Oh, that's a great idea. And, I was just reading an article. I'll have to try, let me make another note, see if I can find it again, talking about neuroscience and and how taking recess away or eliminating recess in PE classes and music and art, like how that is really harming kids, and we know that from the neuroscience research. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And that would be an excellent one, Shelley, if you want to pick that as your passion project. Yes. So if you know others that would benefit from this, make sure you're sharing this and letting us know how things are going. Tricia says, two of my kids, time and time again, informal suspension is a thing, and I didn't even know it. I guess I just wanted them to not be secluded in a concrete room. Yeah. And so then it's like, so what's your choice? If you don't come pick them up, they're going to be spending the rest of their day in a concrete room. It's like, no, 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 right? This can't keep happening. Um, and that's why we got to be working together. Um, and so Abby, hey Abby, she's from Kentucky. She said our district has a program. Yes, I love this, that provides food each day to take home and for the weekend. Isn't that cool? Breakfast and lunch are free for all students through a grant. They also have a clothes closet, etc., holiday gift program, holiday dinners. They also offer to be paid for sport or extra activities if they can't afford it. It's helpful to students, but it doesn't fix all the issues of poverty, but it helps. Yeah, and and I'll have to see, like, I don't know if I get permission from some of the authors of the articles in here, but it's so I could share the actual article with you. But there was a great article in here about, yes, we might have some of these systems set up, but it's like it takes the student or the parent to initiate it. It's not like you can just have this, it's like you have to always be proclaiming your poverty and proving and showing and asking. And so, yeah, it's helpful when we have these things, like the food pantries and things like that. And then we just have to make sure that we're doing it with respect and that people, students, and families aren't feeling shame because they have to ask for some kind of help. So, so that's just like another interesting thing that we need to look at. Um, Anne says, I added movement breaks as accommodation, which protects recess. Inside recess needs to include movement also. Yeah. And so, you know, I don't know exactly how it's worded, Anne, but I always look at how can this be interpreted different ways. So if I saw an accommodation for movement breaks, I could say we're giving your child movement breaks. They're, walking to the bathroom, they're walking to library, um, and they could still take away recess as a punishment or whatever, and say, well, we provided movement breaks during the day. So I'm not sure, depending on how that's worded, that would cover you. And, this is just my advocacy hat and my um, looking at details of things. So that might be something that you want to check. Um, Yeah. So, and see, this is a good point. She said, I heard of this program, but many times kids are embarrassed to take the food home. So, see, it's like we came up with this great idea, and probably the problem might be we, as white, middle class, privileged people, came up with this idea without asking the kids, without having conversations with families like, do you want this? And how can this best be provided so it's not an embarrassment? So, yeah, huh. And those are the little glitches, right? We come up with these excellent ideas, but maybe it's not like actually being put out there in a way that people are going to feel comfortable, receiving it. So thank you. Thank you. Um, and Tricia says, this year my child with ASD has been allowed to participate in the after school program. No additional staff supports needed, and he's loving it. So yay, we like to hear those successes, right? And Abby agrees with us, right? There has to be a better solution besides restraints and seclusion. And Allison says, so if state laws don't protect recess, we should at the very least write something into our IEPs protecting the sanctity of recess, then advocate for all on a legislative level. Yeah, and that's, with our new membership group, Connecting for Change, that is opening up in January. I'm so excited. That's something that we'll be talking about, because some people feel comfortable advocating on just the local level. Some people feel more like we're going to push it and we're going to start working at the state policy level. So in our new group, we're going to be supporting, giving ideas, giving you contacts of people to tap into their brains and the things that they've learned. But yeah. And the other big thing that I want to say is, when I talk about we need to be doing all this collective advocacy, I don't want parents to feel like less than if they're not out there doing, advocacy on kind of a larger level. And it's actually why we need to do more collective advocacy, because there are so many parents, for a variety of reasons, like English isn't their first language. They can't afford to be at an IEP meeting and lose their wages. They're from a culture that, like, you don't question authority. If this is what a teacher says, you accept that. So there are parents, for a variety of reasons, that aren't going to have that privilege to be at the IEP table, to be reading the drafts and all that good stuff. And that's why we need to pick up that slack. Because if we don't create change on a system level, if it still depends on every parent being this, heroic advocate, that's not going to give us any kind of meaningful change for all the students. So if you are doing enough right now for your child and it's like my plate is overflowing, know that I understand that. And I don't want you to add more mom guilt, right? Which is easy for us to do. So it's okay. Just know that your individual advocacy isn't really going to bring about change for others. And I think that's a myth that I've believed for a number of years, that yes, we're changing things for kids behind us, but we're really not. It doesn't really happen that way. So I know it can be like incredibly frustrating. And I also want to say that, behind these statistics are kids. They're like real people. It's not just a data point, but it's kids, it's students. Their lives are being impacted. And that's why we need to do the work. Now, I totally get it. As I think we've said, it can be overwhelming when you look at, like, shit, there's so much wrong. How can we ever get enough impact to change? Have you ever felt that way? Or there's too many kids to help, because I don't want us just to focus on kids with disabilities. I want our collective advocacy to be helping each and every student in the class, in the building. So it's not just a special ed issue. This is an education issue. And then you look at that and it's like, well, oh my gosh, how are we going to make change for all the kids in our schools? So And then the reality is, I already have enough to do, right? And that's okay. And like Tricia said earlier, there's going to be times when we have to put a pause on things and say, right now, my energy needs to be focused on my family. Or even better, right now, my energy needs to be focused on myself, right? So let's look at what are the alternatives? What can we do differently? And not just what works, but what matters. What matters to you? What matters to the families and the teachers in your building? Because that's where we want to put our energy. What matters? So let's look at some ways that we can do that. So I talked about our new group coming in January, Connecting for Change. And one of the big focuses on our group is going to be growing communities. Now, if you have been around me for very long, you probably have heard me say more than once that we need to widen our circle of allies. We need to dismantle whatever this us versus them mentality when it comes to families and educators. And I've been a teacher. I was a teacher for 30 years. I've been a parent longer. And I get it. There are times when we are going to be in disagreement, and that's a reality. And yet, we need to also look at this individual advocacy we've been doing as parents has had very little, has impacted the school system in very small ways. It's time for us to say, enough is enough. It's time for us to look, because there are teachers in every state that are also advocating for educational change. We need to find those educators and have them also join us in our new community in January, and join on your local level of working together. Because there are teachers, there are speech therapists, there are school psychologists, principals, administrators that also want to see the change that you want to see. So what we need to do is to gather those people and to build our communities, build. And one of the books that I also wanted to share with you, which I just love, is this book that's called When People Care Enough to Act. And this is wonderful, like, well-researched, well-documented practice of community building and community organizing. And like I said, you can pick the passion project that you have, the change that you want to make in the education system. And the principles that we'll be talking about in our new group, they can apply to any area, any subject, right? So I just want to encourage people. I know that most of our community have kids with, disabilities. And it's okay for us to think outside of that disability box and look at the other kinds of changes that we want to make. So when we are growing our communities, it's because we've realized that our advocacy has to go beyond us as individuals. Our advocacy has to go beyond our own children, our own students in our classroom. And when we widen our circle of allies, our students are going to be thriving. And that's the big picture of what we want, right? Now, the other point that we're going to be making a lot in our new group is being a detective. So, do you remember this guy? Um, we're going to be looking and finding the strengths of our communities. So, um, I think we have a lot of talk about, finding our student strengths and making sure that teachers understand that, and how to support our kids based on their strengths. What I want to do is I want to take that concept, and it's not like it's new because, oops, somebody else has figured this out too. Um, but to look at the strengths in our community, look at the strengths of all the staff that work in our buildings, um, the strengths that we might have with business connections, right? A lot of businesses are really wanting to support education. Realtors, look at realtors and how you can make relationships with realtors and they can help. Realtors love to be able to say, our school system is the best. Um, Look at the strengths of the people and how can we tap into those strengths. And so when you're working with a group of people on a certain project, a certain change that you want to see, look at the strengths and the talents and the skills of the people on that committee, and tap into those. So it's going to be very exciting because when the new group opens, we'll be talking about how to map the assets in your community. Um, and it's just going to be a way that we can really expand our efforts and take that energy that we have and make sure that it's really going to impact larger groups of kids. Um, so the other area that we can focus on and make, really impactful change is to change our conversations. And this is also something that we've been talking about. I know this fall we've had some different live shows on, instead of asking so many how questions too early, but to look within ourselves and to see, how we can connect, make relationships. And one of the big things with changing our conversations is going to be around asking better questions. And it's going to be less of, emailing your principal articles about research-based instruction, because we've been doing that and it really hasn't moved the needle very far, right? So one of the things that we're going to be looking about when we talk about changing conversations is there are specific language uses that we're going to be sharing, that we can influence people. We can shift their perspectives and their beliefs. We can look at that ableism and say, like, how is this belief not serving us? We need to change this culture or this belief because we want all our kids to experience equity in the school building, right? So, though, like I said, it's just really interesting. So I don't know if you've heard of NLP, neuro linguistic programming. And I'm not talking about like being a weirdo used car salesman and trying to influence people. But what I'm talking about is there are too many held tightly beliefs in our culture that are preventing impactful change. And how can we influence? How can we help people shift those perspectives and beliefs? And that's what you'll be getting in our new group. I am like so psyched about, because the other thing I'll have to share are some templates that I've never shared before, and even in our Trailblazer group, that are really step-by-step frameworks of how you go through a conversation when you're trying to change someone's beliefs. And it's not scream louder, give them more articles. But there are things, and it's based on neuroscience too. So it's like so totally interesting. I think you'll love it. Now, another part that can be really helpful for us to have larger change is not only challenging the beliefs that others have and the beliefs that exist in our culture, but looking at the beliefs that we have as individuals. The conditioning that we've experienced year after year, from our families, from our communities, from the school environments we've been in, this conditioning that has taught us certain things that really aren't being helpful. So again, we are going to look at, this whole and how we can make impactful change, but we'll also be spending time and looking at ourselves and what our strengths are, and kind of the birthright that you have to be the person that you are. So that will be pretty cool. Also, and one of the techniques that we'll be using to challenge our individual beliefs and the self-doubt kind of stuff is this future pacing, which I've called like back to the future. And I don't have time to get into all of it today. I've shared it in some other videos, but basically what the future pacing is to think about what you want to have happen, like a year, 5 years from now. And the story you tell yourself is that already happened. So, just for a quick example, like a year from now, you could be saying, remember when Charmaine had that Facebook Live and she was talking about really having meaningful change? And in this past year, look at all the things that have happened in our school district. And you visualize, you say, you see, you feel all of those things that have already happened. And that can be so helpful on many different levels. And it sounds a little bit strange, maybe at the beginning, but when you experience it, it is like the coolest. So I know. You might still be saying, well, I don't know, Charmaine. I kind of doubt that. But I am here to tell you that it is all possible. So on my Facebook memories today, this lovely buffalo came up as a memory, and I was just looking at him today, and look at those eyes, look at that fierceness, look at that. I call them buffaloes as being wise animals, and some people say I don't think so, but I just see a lot of wisdom there. And so to me, the message today from our friend the buffalo is for us to be bold. Be bold. Stand there in your truth. Because that's how we're going to get meaningful change. Speak your truth. It will happen. Change is possible. Change is happening. So let's go back to some comments and see how you guys are doing. Let me know. Does this make sense? Does any of it sound like, I would be interested in knowing more about that? Yeah. Uh, let's see. So Allison says UDL addresses some of our most pressing issues, more variety of instructional methods, more practical supports for kids on 504s, more racial, gender equity in instruction and education. Yeah, I am like a huge proponent of UDL, and I sometimes will call it UDI, Universal Design for Inclusion, um, because if we were implementing the framework of UDL in the classrooms with fidelity, all kids' needs could be met, right? Because as teachers, we're going to use a variety of ways to present information to students. Um, we're going to be looking on how we empower students to make decisions on what they want to be learning and tapping into that motivation that they have. And we also are going to have a variety of ways for kids to show us what they've learned and know. So yeah, to me, because inclusion sometimes has like, it's a trigger word for so many. So for me, it's almost like maybe instead of advocating so passionately for inclusive education, maybe we could be passionate about advocating for universal design for learning. And that, under that big UDL umbrella, all students will rise to the occasion. And speaking of empower, yesterday I had this day, I need to get a drink of water, where just like so many things were like laid in front of me, and it was like, oh, I forgot about this. So yesterday I read an email from John Snyder. If you're not on his list, I would encourage you to. Again, what he writes mainly about is for teachers, educators, but there's so much we can learn from his work as family members too. So he has this book, it's called What Happens When Students Own Their Learning, Empower, and how we can empower students. And so that's another aspect that we'll be pulling into our new membership group in January, is that student voice. Because when our kids are younger, yes, we can help, be their voice, but we got to give the microphone to them much earlier than we have been. So that whole student, that self-advocacy kinds of things, and making sure that students are represented on, school district, state committees. Their voice has to be at the table, and that's something for sure that we can work on. Sharon says, thanks for sharing. I'm so glad you're here. Anne says, the new group sounds amazing. I have lots of ideas, but knowing which one I want to tackle first. Yeah, and that's part of what we'll be doing. And it also depends on who you're collaborating with, because part of that process of, growing your communities, widening your circle of allies, is to have time to talk and see the people that you've pulled together, what's the consensus on what you're going to do first. And sometimes it can be those smaller projects. It doesn't have to be huge. You want to get some momentum going, you want to get some wins and success. So it can be like, I know one of our trailblazers, Michelle, was talking about looking at different books that, the library, your building library could make sure that they have in their collection, as far as books showing students from different cultures, books showing, disabled students as being capable and that we don't have to pity them. So, just library books. I mean, that could be a project that you want to work on. And what I'm excited about in the group, many things, but one of the things I'm excited about is, we have talked a lot about IEPs and measurable goals and prior written notice. And I just feel like there's a lot of that out there. I've written a book that you can use about that. And I feel like for myself, and I think for a lot of families and teachers, it's like time for us to get re-energized and bring back that hope and that expectation that change is really possible and it's happening, and it can happen in our school district too. So that's the excitement I'm looking at. And Allison talks about CAST. Yes, that's that kind of the gold standard when you talk about universal design for learning. So I always encourage people to go to cast.org. She said they have a webinar for parents to learn about UDL and advocate for their schools. Oh, cool. Allison, she says, I'm volunteering with them. If it's okay, here's a link. Yes, yes, yes. If you write in the registration referred by Allison, they'll know I'm doing my volunteer work. Yes, yes. Well, thank you. Yeah. Do you have the date, Allison? When is that coming out? Because CAST has wonderful webinars, and so to have one specifically for families to learn more about it would be excellent. The other thing that I always want to encourage is that when we have any kind of professional development for teachers, that we also invite parents to go. So we're learning the same thing at the same time. And then for like webinars and things like this would be excellent for students to watch, most likely as a replay, right? If it happens during the school day. But we want kids to know about universal design for learning too, because then the kids can speak up and say, like, it scares me to death to do a, live presentation. What else can I do on this topic so I don't have to be so nervous about standing up in front of the class? We want our kids to be out there advocating and speaking up and knowing about universal design for learning too. So, January 23rd. Cool, cool, cool. Great. Yes. Remember to say referred by Allison. Cool. Thank you. Thank you. And Anne Marie said that she'll share it too. Yeah. I mean, that's what our group is about, right? I mean, we don't, there are too many wonderful things going on. And for us to share those, that's like working together. So we are at the top of the hour. I have enjoyed your comments and your voice, and I just want to encourage you to keep on keeping on, and to remember that when we work collaboratively, when we work on collective advocacy, we are helping all students, all families. And because an individual family can't be at the table as much as they want to, that's how our collective advocacy is going to help. Because if we, and I don't know how many times I say this, but it's like, if we just keep advocating for our own kids, we leave out so many other families. Instead, when we make substantial change in our education system It won't be up to individual parents to have to be advocating. And yes, I also have to say there are going to be times when you still have to individually advocate. I'm not saying don't go to your IEP meetings anymore. They'll just be perfect. No, it's not either or, it's an and. So if you have the energy, if you have the passion, if you have the privilege to be able to advocate for others, I really encourage you to do that. And I'll be sending out more emails. Again, I'll put my link up here. If you're not on my email list, get on it, because I'll be talking more about our group opening in January. And I would love for each of you to be there, because it's like magic. We can create magic. It's all possible. So I'll leave you with this last slide. Be bold and speak your truth.